So starting us off in at number 10, we have Villisca Axe Murderer House in Villisca, Iowa, easily the most notable murders out of Iowa. This story has haunted the town of Villisca since 1912. On June 10th of that year, the new house got a new nickname, the Axe Murder House, after a gruesome murder took place. Josiah B. Moore and his wife, along with their 4 young children and 2 guests of the family, were bludgeoned to death with, you guys guessed it, an axe. Well, what's more, they never identified who did it to them. The authorities investigated for 10 years and had famous grand jury trials over what would be called today as, well, famously said by Donald Trump, is fake news. Slander lawsuits took place and many political careers were broken because of it all.
Information that was false and fake and never happened got released to the public.
As the story goes, the family had a normal day leading up to the evening, with their kids at a Sunday school program and their 2 neighbors joining and spending the night. The axe used was already on the Moore property and is the ominous weapon used against the 8 victims. But the strangest thing about this eerie tale is that the axe was found next to a pond of bacon, and all of the windows and mirrors were covered up with clothes and piece of wood from furniture. There was blood everywhere, and there was a plate of uneaten food. Is this real life right now? I have no idea what is going on. The mysterious killer must have had to go on to the next family, because from 1911 to 1912 there was a slew of other eerily similar axe murderers in Iowa. There is said to be as many as 24 similar murders cases that were never solved. Number 9, the Winchester Mystery House, San Jose, California. This is the story of Sarah Lockwood Winchester and the mystery behind her choice to do construction on the house every single day from when she moved in. Her late husband, William Wirt Winchester, is the man responsible for the Winchester rifle, a historically famous gun that is said to have, won the West. Well, they had a baby girl who died 6 weeks after birth, and her husband passed away shortly after that from tuberculosis. Legends have it that Sarah had spoken to a fortune teller of sorts who told her to leave her home in Connecticut and move west. She chose San Jose, but it gets even more strange. This medium had told her that the bad fortune that her family had was because of the men that were killed at the hands of the famous Winchester rifle, and that she needed to build a house big enough for all of them if she wanted to remain alive. Well, this house is a whopping 24,000 square feet. I can't imagine how many bathrooms are in that place. The house was under 24/7, 365 construction for 38 years. Absolutely insane. She really wanted to take the advice seriously. You can just imagine how insane that would be. Just to give you guys a hint, there are 10,000 windows, 47 stairways, and 6 kitchens, because why not? You never know what room you're in where you're gonna get hungry. Alright, moving right along on this list, at number 8 we have the Sultan's Palace, New Orleans, the house at 1716 Dauphine Street, which is a classic French Quarter palace. In 1836, it was said to be leased by the Turkish Sultan when the owner was in a bind, but they needed money but they didn't want to sell it. For months, parties took place that were said to have uniformed men and beautiful women in. Well, concern from the neighbors came when it obviously turned it into an opium den and could hear screams over the loud music that was constantly playing. No one knew what truly went on in that house unless they went in themselves. But the great mystery of the house was the Sultan's demise. One morning, a passerby noticed that there was blood dripping from the windows and front steps of the palace. Police arrived on the scene only to find men and women and children scattered around the property, dismembered. Their body parts was virtually everywhere. Is this real life right now? They found one man buried in the courtyard who initially assumed to be the Sultan, but it was in fact his brother. Coming in hot at number 7 on this list, the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park. If you've read or seen The Shining, you know the feeling of this often snowbound hotel. It's the location Stephen King based his Overlook Hotel upon. It may not look like the film unless you watch the 1990s made-for-TV movie version, which yeah, I don't think anyone has. I mean, just just walking to your room can drain you. So one stiff drink might have you seeing ghosts, or a couple kids chanting red rum, red rum. Number 6, we're bringing you Red Onion Saloon, Skagway, Alaska. Established in 1898 as a brothel for miners during the Klondike Gold Rush, Alaska's Red Onion Saloon, it had a feature that set it apart from other bordellos. It used dolls to help run its business, always a good sign, right? Well, every day 10 dolls would be placed on the bar downstairs, each one representing one of the ladies working in the upstairs room. A customer would choose one of the dolls, at which point it would lay down on the bar to indicate that particular workers were occupied. When the customers came back downstairs, the doll would be returned to her sitting position to let other potential clients know that she was available. Well, fast forward to 2019, when the Red Onion Saloon still operates as a bar and restaurant, yet the dolls are still on display, and it offers tours of the upstairs rooms, which are preserved as sort of like a mixed-shaped brothel museum. As if these dolls weren't creepy enough, there were reports of Lydia, a former madame of a brothel, haunting the site, complete with cold spots and lingering spells of perfume rafting through the walls. I mean, all creepiness aside, I'm more curious about how this place got named Red Onion. I mean, they could have came up with any other name. Well, let me know what you guys would call this in the comment section below. Give me a name. Alright, we're halfway on this list. Number 5, we got RMS Queen Mary in Long Beach, California. This retired ocean liner sailed the Atlantic Ocean from 1936 to 1967. During the first 3 years at sea, the Queen Mary carried Hollywood celebrities like Elizabeth Taylor. Her days as a luxurious ship were short-lived. In 1939, she was stripped of her amenities and began her second life as a Grey Ghost, a World War II troop ship. At the conclusion of the war, she was restored to her former glory and traversed the Atlantic for nearly 2 more decades. On Halloween 1967, the Queen Mary departed on her last cruise, eventually docking in Long Beach, California, her final resting place. The ship is reportedly haunted by the spirits of those who died aboard, such as the young sailor who was crushed to death by a door in the engine room and a crew member who was murdered in cabin B340. Number 4, Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast in Fall River. So this location came up on nearly every search on our quest to find this top 10 list for you guys. Well, you've likely heard of the children's rhyme Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave it to her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Well, you can not only visit the scene of that famous 1892 double homicide, you can also sleep at the Borden's home, eat their last meal, Johnny cakes, a thick cornmeal pancakes and eggs, in case you were wondering, and spend the last nights in the bedroom where the bodies of Lizzie's stepmother Abigail was found. Someone who stayed there said, "I can attest, this home painstakingly furnished to look exactly as it did on the morning of the murders." Well, that will creep you right out. Better though, the 175-year-old property hosts up to 20 overnight guests, in which some of them, for some reason, it's a tradition when you go to this place, they will actually whip out a Ouija board. I mean, I'm not down for Ouija. That is a real life situation that can happen, and let alone whipping out a Ouija board in a haunted place. Finally, down to number 3 on this list, we have Crescent Hotel, Erica Springs, Arkansas. Since its construction in 1886, the Crescent Hotel has served several purposes: luxury resorts, conservatory for young women, junior college. But the strangest mark on its history came in 1937 when it got a new owner, Norman G. Baker. Baker was a millionaire inventor who decided to pose as a doctor despite having no medical training, and turned the hotel into a hospital that can cure cancer. Well, he was eventually found out and he was ran out of town, although reports say that his spirits found its way back to the site and found some otherworldly company too. The now operating Crescent Hotel is said to be haunted by at least 8 ghosts, ranging from a 5-year-old girl to a bearded man wearing Victorian clothing. 1 ghost is enough for me, never mind 8 of them, and children ghosts, I think those were the absolute scariest kind. Number 2 on this list, Heaven's Gate mass suicide site in Rancho Santa Fe. I mean, when you have the word suicide site, yeah, no thanks, not for this brown guy. The golf course strewn San Diego suburb of Rancho Santa Fe regularly makes the most expensive zip codes in the USA. So it came a stunner in 1997 when the world learned it was the home to Heaven's Gate, a cult whose 39 members drank poisoned Kool-Aid as the Hale-Bopp comet passed Earth, believing that aliens behind the comet would rupture their souls to heaven. Yeah, really weird. I'm not making this stuff up. Their bodies were found dressing in black sweatshirts and sweatpants, Nike sneakers, faces covered with purple cloth, and carrying $5.75 in one pocket. A toll of people speculated to catch a ride on the comet. And number 1, we have Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, Western West Virginia. This 4-botting asylum began construction in 1858 and opened to patients in 1864. The massive structure was designed by architect Richard Andrews to maximize sunlight and fresh air. It was believed that the building itself would serve as a healing environment. It was designed for 250 people housed and 2,400 patients in crowded conditions. I mean, that's a pretty big range going from 250 to 2,400. Patients were physically restrained and often given inhumane treatments such as the electroshock therapy and lobotomies, which was very popular back in the day. After more than a century in operation, the facility was forced to close in 1994, which when you think about it wasn't too long ago, within the last 30 years. And it was due to the reforms in mental health and treatment and the deterioration of the building. Hundreds of patients died during the asylum tenure, and scores of guests and ghost hunters have claimed they're seeing shadowy figures roaming around the facility. And at number 10, this creepy statue is located at the entrance of Stowe Lake. It was built in 1914 to honor the pioneer women of the Old West, and it was placed in Golden Gate Park in the 40s. But this isn't a regular statue. There are a ton of rumors about the statue being able to move on its own, something that it shouldn't be able to do. Witnesses have said that they can see the woman's head move from side to side as if she was looking for something. Maybe she's looking for her missing child. It is also said that she will change her facial expressions, and sometimes she'll distort her face to look like a hideous monster. Sounds like I'll be staying away from the statue. There are also a lot of stories about seeing a phantom shape of a third child statue, but when you go closer to it, it just disappears. Oh, and you can also hear the sounds of evil children laughing if you get too close, so be warned. The tunnels of Chinatown brings us to number 9. Apparently there are a ton of secret tunnels buried deep under Chinatown, and residents of Chinatown use them to get to their hidden opium dens and gambling rooms without being caught. There's been a ton of speculation that these tunnels were once a really shady tourist attraction, while others still say that it's used for illegal activity. But due to an earthquake, it is now believed that these tunnels are now blocked off by fallen debris. But who knows, maybe someone found a way in, so we never know what might be lurking inside of these tunnels. Mary Ellen Pleasant haunts us in at number 8. She was a former slave who came to San Francisco in 1899. Eventually she was able to open up her own restaurant, where she would pick up stock tips from wealthy businessmen who ate there. She was so clever that she was able to use these stock tips to make herself rich. She built a very nice mansion on Octavia Street, where she lived with her business partner and his wife. But here's where things got ugly. She was accused of pushing her business partner down the stairs and killing him. She was pressured to move out of the city, and she quickly lost all of her savings and died a few years later. I mean, talk about bad karma. So now it is said that her spirit haunts the Memorial Park on Octavia and Bush Street. And if you stand on the plaque and politely make a wish, it will be granted. But beware, Mary Ellen Pleasant will throw rocks at your head if you don't show her the proper respect. So make sure when you're making a wish, give some respect. The Pinecrest Diner brings us
number 7. The Hotel de Coriando, San Diego. Hotel de Coriando is a historic hotel that opened in 1888. Kate Morgan has haunted this hotel since 1892, the year she checked in and awaited the arrival of her husband. The two were traveling con artists, and not surprisingly, her husband never showed up, and 4 days later, Kate was found dead at the bottom of an outdoor staircase leading to the Coronado Beach. Today, those who check into Kate's room, which is now room 3312, have had spooky experiences to say the least. Curtains blowing even though the windows are closed, objects moved by unseen hands, murmuring sounds, and even sightings of Kate walking down the hallways and peering out the windows have all been reported. Her ghost is often seen both in the hotel and on the beach. Now room 3519, formerly room 3502, is also haunted. Once a maid's room, it's been the site of numerous paranormal occurrences, such as objects moving around by themselves. Number 6. The Whaley House, San Diego. The Whaley House is the oldest brick structure in Southern California and was the home of Thomas Whaley and his family. At various times, it also housed Whaley's General Store, San Diego's second county courthouse, and the first commercial theater in San Diego. The house has witnessed more history than any other building in the city, and it is extremely haunted. One of the most infamous ghosts there is the spirit of Yankee Jim Robinson. Yankee Jim was hanged in the gallows where the house now stands in 1852 after being convicted of stealing horses. Thomas Whaley himself, who owned and lived in the house with his family years later, said they could hear heavy footsteps going up and down the stairs. Now visitors have reported cold spots and the feeling of their chest and throat tightening within the home. Others claim to have seen Yankee Jim too, an apparition that appears and disappears when you get too close. Today, and for many years, visitors to the house have also reported seeing Thomas. They usually see him wearing a frock coat and pantaloons standing on the second-story landing. Others have seen his wife Anna, usually floating around in the garden or the downstairs room. Her ghost, which appears white and billowy, seems to just drift about and then disappears. Number 5. Winchester Mystery House, San Jose. Now after finding out what this place is, I really want to visit here. I mean, just by the name Mystery House, it's cool. Now some backstory on the house: Sarah Winchester lived a tragic yet interesting life. She married William Wirt Winchester in 1862, who was a very wealthy man. Sadly though, her husband, mother, and father-in-law all passed away within the same year. To deal with her grief, she moved to California after gaining a large inheritance from her husband. Then on top of all of that, Sarah was being haunted by the spirits of those whose lives were ended by the Winchester rifle, which her husband's company had invented. After her husband passed away, a psychic told her to evade the spirits, she would need to move out west, buy a home, and build non-stop. She took 36 years to construct the home, and this house has 6 kitchens, 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, 17 chimneys, 160 rooms, and many doors and stairs that lead to nowhere. Workers and visitors swear they hear howling at night, loud creaking, and sometimes the kitchen smells like someone is actively cooking. But regardless if you believe in ghosts or not, the house is absolutely stunning. Number 4. Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, Los Angeles. The Hollywood Roosevelt is considered to be one of the most haunted hotels in Los Angeles. It first opened its doors in 1927 and was a frequent home to Marilyn Monroe, who often stayed in the second floor cabana. Interestingly, the doors to this hotel are still open, allowing visitors to spend the night in Marilyn's suite, and some people claim to have seen Marilyn's ghost smiling and blowing kisses at them in their hotel mirrors. Hotel workers often talk about seeing the ghost of Charlie Chaplin and feel temperatures drop quickly from one room to the next. The apparition of Montgomery Clift has been blamed for patting guests' shoulders and watching maids in room 928, where he stayed for 3 months while filming From Here to Eternity. The ghost of Carole Lombard has also been spotted floating around the upper floors, and in the Blossom Room, where the first Oscars were held, 2 ghosts have been spotted, a presence of a tuxedoed man and a presence of a man in a white suit. Seems like if you want to meet a dead celebrity, the Roosevelt Hotel is the place to go. Number 3. Alcatraz, San Francisco Bay. The famous maximum security prison Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary earned a reputation as one of the most brutal and inhumane prisons in the country during its day. The strong currents around the island and cold water temperatures made escape nearly impossible, and the prison became one of the most notorious in American history. The prison closed in 1963, and the island is now a major tourist attraction. A total of 36 prisoners made 14 escape attempts, 23 were caught alive, 6 had their lives ended by guards during their escape, 2 drowned, and 5 are listed as missing and presumed drowned. Now during its 29 years in use, use, Alcatraz held some of the most notorious American criminals, including Al Capone, George Machine Gun Kelly, and Bumpty Johnson. Today, it's a tourist attraction that many believe to be haunted. Inexplicable events happen, like the sound of someone playing the banjo. Many believe this to be the spirit of Al Capone, who spent his last days at the prison playing a banjo in the shower room to avoid being injured in the yard. The smell of smoke, the sounds of cell doors slamming, disembodied voices, moaning, and screams have also all been reported. Number 2. Queen Mary, Long Beach. Queen Mary is a retired British ocean liner that sailed from 1936 to 1967. She sailed to the port of Long Beach, California, where she is permanently docked. The city of Long Beach bought the ship to serve as a tourist attraction, featuring restaurants, a museum, and a hotel, but claims were made that the ship was haunted. There are resident spirits, including Jackie, the little girl who haunts the first-class pool, John Petter, who was crushed by a watertight door, Senior Second Officer William Eric Stark, who accidentally drank dry cleaning fluid instead of gin, and the cook, who was baked alive by his own kitchen staff during World War II. But most arguably, the most notorious location on the ship for paranormal activity is room B340. Reports claim someone was knocking on the door in the middle of the night, bathroom lights turning on by themselves, the sink faucet turning on and off on its own, and unexplained bathroom doors shutting. Some guests have reported the covers of their bed being pulled off while asleep and waking to see a dark figure standing at the foot of the bed. There are even more stories about this place, but I don't have enough time to fit them all in. If you're really interested in Queen Mary, I say do some homework on it because it definitely gets creepier. And coming in at number 1 is the Cecil Hotel, Los Angeles. The Cecil Hotel opened in 1925 as a well-furnished hostelry frequented by respectable people, but that didn't last long. As downtown became more and more dangerous, the Cecil became a place where bad people stayed, like the Night Stalker aka Richard Ramirez and Austrian killer Jack Unterweger spent time there. The Black Dahlia was rumored to have had her last drink at the hotel bar before she turned up dead a few miles away. In 1962, Pauline Otten jumped from the 9th floor window, ending her life. That same year, Julia Moore jumped from an 8th floor window, and Helen Green from the 7th floor in 1954. The Cecil Hotel may have rebranded itself recently as the Stay on Main, but it just can't shake its reputation as a place where scary things happen. In 2013, the body of Canadian tourist Elisa Lam was found in the hotel's rooftop cistern. Her body was discovered by a hotel maintenance worker investigating complaints of flooding and low water pressure. And yes, people had been showering in and drinking that water. Ugh. And last but not least, the ghost of a boy has reportedly been photographed outside a 4th floor window. Spooky. Well, that's all.
And we're going to kick off the list with the legend of the Hook Man. Now, supposedly on Pond Run Road in the village of New Richmond, there once lived a doctor and his wife. They had a son who was mentally disturbed, and these two were ashamed of him and opted to keep him out of the public eye. This meant chaining him up in the basement whenever people were over, or when they just didn't want him in their presence. One night, there was a terrible storm. A bolt of lightning hit their house and a fire started. When authorities arrived on the scene, they found the parents burnt to death, which was the perfect outcome for despicable people like that. But the boy, who had been chained up in the basement at the time, was nowhere to be found, aside from his hand, still chained up to the wall in the basement. So where did he go? Well, legends started to spread that over the years he grew up stalking through the woods, stealing from homes nearby, brandishing a hook for a hand, and brutalizing innocent people, especially young couples. The urban legend of the Hook Man is one you see all over the place. This is just Ohio's specific version of the tale. If you're liking our channel so far, by the way, if you're new here, why not hit that subscribe button? You got nothing to lose. It's free. We got awesome videos coming at you on the daily. Alright, next on the list we have Munchkinland. This urban legend of Munchkinland, also known as Tiny Town in Cincinnati, Ohio, centers around a peculiar area near Rumpke Landfill. Here, a cluster of small houses and buildings allegedly housed a community of little people. According to local lore, these tiny inhabitants were notorious for hurling rocks at passing cars, attempting to deter any intruders. Numerous tales circulated about unsuspecting individuals who stopped their cars bars in the vicinity, only to find themselves confronted by enraged little folk armed with rocks and ready to defend their territory. As to where these little people are said to have come from, the legend goes that they were retired circus performers. Now, there actually was a collection of small structures in this area. They've recently been torn down, I believe. But as to why they were there are lots of different stories, including, of course, that they were built by the little retired circus performers. A more likely explanation, though, is that they had been built by a farmer on the land who had decided he wanted to start running hay rides, and that he, built the houses on the property. But I think it's still a bit murky as to how they got there. Number 8, the Peninsula Python. So this incident involved the discovery of a large python in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park in Peninsula, Ohio in the summer of 1944. The question obviously was, how did this python, native to tropical regions, end up in a park in Ohio? For a while, authorities didn't even think the reports were real, or at least they didn't think people were really seeing what they thought they were seeing. A massive snake stalking the area became something of an urban legend at the time, but turns out that there indeed was a python, and as to how it got there, some believed that it had been a pet released by its owner, others speculated that it had escaped from a traveling circus or a private exotic animal collection. It's still a bit of a mystery to this day as to how it really got there. The python was never even found. It likely died during the winter, but some say it's still stalking its way out there.
Number 7. Moonville Tunnel. Located deep in the woods, the tunnel is framed by a faded stone archway covered in moss. The tunnel itself is long and extremely dark. It's actually an out-of-work stretch of railroad track that leads to an old coal mining town. If you're brave enough to venture through it, you might see the ghost of Frank Lawhead, an unlucky train conductor who met his end in a head-on collision with another train. Visitors in the area have taken photos with cameras or phones, only to look back at them later and notice the pale figure of a man they didn't see before, or phantom train lights blazing at the end of the tunnel. It's also said if you listen carefully, inhale deeply, and blink intermittently, you may encounter spirits from another time. The piercing whistle of a train rounding a curve, the smell of lavender wafting from a woman in an old-fashioned dress, or even the glow of gaslit lantern illuminating the face of the weathered brakeman. So that's fun. Number 6. The Buxton Inn. The Buxton Inn was built by Orrin Granger in 1812 as an inn and tavern, and it also served as Granville's first post office and as a stagecoach stop. I'm just gonna say it, this place is haunted. The first ghost spotted in the Buxton Inn was the first owner, Orrin. Other ghosts include the Lady in Blue, rumored to be the former innkeeper Ethel Bonnie Bonnell, Major Buxton, whom the inn was named, and even a phantom cat seen slinking along the halls. There's been strange activity like footsteps and doors opening on their own reported in the inn's basement, where stagecoach drivers would often stay during their stopovers in the past. However, the ghosts just don't stay in the basement. Oh no. Rooms 7 and 9 are said to be the strongest places for activity, with apparitions appearing. One guest even reported a ghost cat showing up to cuddle and purr in the middle of the night, which, aw, that's so cute. Guests have reported strange phenomenon throughout the hotel though, like their names being called out and invisible footsteps. I would not want to sleep there. Number 5. Woods surrounding London. Okay, again, not London, England, but London, Ohio. Deep inside these woods sits an old abandoned barn that is so rotted away it is practically melded back into the trees. It's rumored that ghosts like to spend some time here. If you ask anyone from the area, they'll tell you that these woods are haunted. According to legend, a family of 5 was traveling through the woods in the late 1890s when they were stopped and had their lives ended by a band of thieves. Those brave enough to wander through the woods of London at night have reported hearing gunshots and disembodied screaming. Others have felt a sudden drop in temperature before seeing a strange white mist hanging in the trees. Let me just say, it's a no for me. Number 4. Ridge's Asylum. Ridge's Asylum originally opened in 1874 and was known as the Athens Asylum for the Insane. It had 2 wings, one for female patients and one for the male patients. The most violent patients were housed at the outermost tip of each wing. By the start of the 1900s, the asylum had become dangerously overcrowded, and rumors of inhumane treatment at the hands of the overworked staff were growing. Despite this, it was not officially closed until 1999. 1993. Some parts of the building are still in use, while other areas are completely abandoned. One of the scariest places in the building is the outline of a body where Margaret Schrilling died in 1979. She apparently got lost in the disused part of the hospital in the winter of 1978-79 and was not found for more than a month. When the corpse was eventually removed, it left a stain that could never be washed away, which just makes me gag thinking about it, but imagine the smell, like, ew. Ugh. She is one of the many ghosts who is said to walk the asylum at night. Strange figures have been seen roaming around the old floors. Others have heard disembodied voices, footsteps, and screaming. Most appealing to imagination is the basement. Some claim severely disabled patients were kept on chains in dungeon-like places. Some say they've even heard the chains being pulled. Oh, and there's also a cemetery on the grounds which holds over 1,930 bodies. Of those, 700 women and 959 men lay under the headstones marked with only a number, which is sad. Number 3. Bobby Mackey's. Built in 1850, Bobby Mackey's is said to be the most haunted nightclub in America. When it was first built, the building served as a slaughterhouse and meat packing facility. The standard for most slaughterhouses of its day, the facility featured a well to collect the runoff of animal blood, innards, and other waste. If that image wasn't icky enough, there have also been several deaths in and around the club throughout the years. The place harbors energy so dark that a portal to hell is rumored to swirl somewhere within its basement. There is strange, suffocating heat, a trash can once flew through the air, and the apparition of a man with a handlebar mustache appears in the mirror. I would not want to get anywhere near that place ever. Number 2. Licking County Jail. Originally opened in 1889, the Licking County Jail is now home to only prisoners serving afterlife sentences. It contains stacks of cramped, grimy cells lining its dimly lit halls. Since being put out of commission, the jail has become a notoriously haunted hotspot. While it was operating, a total of 3 sheriffs and 19 inmates died on the premise. If you make your way to Licking County Jail, it's said you should peer between the cell bars as figures of prisoners are said to peer back. Visitors have reported hearing cell doors slamming, being touched, whispering in your ear, whistles, the sound of footsteps, some of those being what seems residual, the jingling of keys, screams, and moaning, as well as seeing strange light anomalies, full shadow figures, and photos with unexpected images in them. That sounds absolutely terrifying, and I would not want to go there. And coming in at number 1 is Sedamsville Rectory. The Sedamsville Rectory is a historical building that once served as the home for priests of Our Lady of Perpetual Help Church. Priests of questionable moral character were rumored to live here, if you know what I mean, including a man who was moved around considerably before retiring from the priesthood, leaving some to believe the church was covering up his tendency of mistreating animals. His fellow priests later confessed to hearing strange sounds coming from his bedroom and feeling uneasy in his presence. As the alleged site of the mistreatment, it's no shock that the place has some wicked demonic energy. Reports detail strange howling cries and deep scratches appearing in the flesh of workers. The current owner of the building, Terry Scott, even claimed that she was pushed by an invisible force. The presence was so evil that a priest was called in to perform an exorcism, but his efforts did little to keep the demonic energy at bay, and whatever monster lurked in there still remains, and I would not want to mess with it. Number 10. The Bisman Building. The Bisman Building was built in 1886, and fun fact, the film Shawshank Redemption used this place as a filming location. If you have seen the film, the building is used as the entrance to the Brewer Hotel, where Brooks and Red stayed after they were paroled from Shawshank. The real building, though, is haunted. While here many people experience a feeling of dread and sadness, particularly on the 3rd floor. Many people also report an overwhelming sensation of darkness when on this floor, so if I were you, I would just stay away from the 3rd floor in general. Disembodied footsteps, voices, being poked and pushed, black shadows, and dark figures caught in images seems to be something that happens a lot. Spirits of a young girl, Ruthie, her aunt, and the spirit of a retired worker who died in an accident before leaving the building are 3 identified spirits that stay here. In past investigations here, investigators have received audible responses to their questions. Yep, the ghosts spoke to them. One piece of audio evidence was when an investigator asked if they could speak to Ruthie, and a voice was caught saying, "Is Ruthie here?" In addition to Ruthie, people have witnessed the spirit of a woman throughout the upper floors, people in Victorian clothing, and the sounds of people working. Number 9. Staley Road. Sometime in the early 1800s, pioneer John Wrench used the services of 3 Staley brothers to build a flour mill. The finished structure was to become the first double-wheeled mill in Ohio. The business flourished, and after several years, John had made enough money to retire and ended up selling his mill to Elias Staley. The mill was then passed down to his brother Andrew and continued to produce flour until 1905. Today, the mill is still standing, and on Staley Road, named for the brothers, winds its way past and through the woods. It has become something of a rite of passage for local teens to drive this road at night to show how brave they are. It's been said that Old Man Staley went on a rampage ending the lives of many and is now haunting the road. Motorists say that they often experience unexplained car trouble, and some have even seen Staley's ghost standing next to or even lying in the road. Number 8. The Golden Lamb. As the oldest hotel in Ohio, the Golden Lamb has seen more than its share of famous guests, including Charles Dickens, Mark Twain, Daniel Webster, and 12 American presidents. Yeah. 12. It's fantastic, but there's also been death and tragedy in the hotel. Guests have cited a girl who may be Sarah Stubbs, the niece of the hotel manager in the 1800s, or possibly Eliza Clay, a girl who died of a high fever at the hotel in 1825. The ghost of Charles R. Sherman, an Ohio Supreme Court justice who died at the inn in 1929, is said to appear in the hallways as a gray, gaunt man and conjures the smell of cigar smoke. Charles's death left his wife and 11 children, including Civil War General William T. Sherman, penniless. As a result, most of his children were put up for adoption, and some say the guilt of his family's demise keeps his spirit at the inn.
To number 7. This restaurant sits on the corner of Mason and Gary, and there's a sign that reads "Best Breakfast in San Francisco." Okay, I couldn't vouch for the food there because I've never been. I've been to San Francisco many times, but if you like your eggs poached, then you should probably never eat there. And that's because this restaurant refuses to make it because of an urban legend that has been circulating around. Apparently a murder took place at this diner in 1997. The cook shot and killed the waitress, and rumors has it that earlier that day, the waitress yelled at the cook for making poached eggs when they aren't even on the menu. According to the legend, the chef was so angry that when he came into work the next morning, he came in with a gun. The cook never admitted that the eggs were the cause of his murdering rampage, but the restaurant refuses to serve them to this day. Up next, number 6, we have the Golden Gate Park Ghost. It is said that if you drive your car through the Golden Gate Park at night, and if you do it with your headlights off, a police officer will pull you over and give you a ticket. However, when you go to pay for the ticket, it will be invalid because the police officer doesn't actually exist. According to the legend, this cop lost his life in the line of duty in this park, but his spirit is still on duty. He roams around the park and approaches people who have committed traffic violations. So even though this is probably just an urban legend, a lot of people in this area said that they've run into him. So it's got to be real, right? So the next time you find yourself driving in Golden Gate Park at night, you might want to obey by the traffic laws just in case, or you might be pulled over by this phantom police officer. Golden Gate Bridge moves on to this list at number 5. Since 1937, more than 1,500 suicides have occurred on the Golden Gate Bridge. Police have tried to prevent suicides from happening on this bridge, and they did this by closing pedestrian access after 6:30, and they've even assigned officers to patrol the walkway. But the tormented souls of the dead jumpers continue to haunt this bridge even to this day. It is said that on dark, foggy nights, the spirit can be seen roaming along the walkways while he's searching for their next victim. Witnesses have reported hearing screams and feeling pulled towards the edge of the bridge. Alcatraz prison brings us to number 4. I've been there, and it's very eerie. Like, you hear a lot of noises. It's for sure haunted. Well, given the amount of prisoners who spent many years on this lonely, cruel island, there are a ton of angry spirits that are haunting this old prison, and I might be able to attest by that. There are reports of shadowy figures, weird mist, cold spots, and there are a lot of noises in the prison as well. If you visit the prison, you'll hear moaning, sobbing, and screams for help. They can even move objects, and if you're unlucky, you might even feel one of them brush past you. It is also said that you will feel cold chills and feel like something bad is going going to happen. And if you value your life, you should never visit 14D. I've done it and it is terrifying. And that's because an angry spirit is trapped inside of the cell, and if it gets a hold of you, you'll probably never make it out alive. I was able to meet one of the officers who were actually active during the Alcatraz days. Sutro Forest suicides takes us to number 3. Well, it looks like San Francisco has their own version of suicide forest, just like Japan. Even though this forest looks like a beautiful spot to have a picnic, it has a very dark history. Between the years of 1899 and 1908, several bodies were found dead in this forest. This forest is so big and dense that it became an ideal location for people to commit suicide without being seen. Because the forest is so thick, it is believed that there are hundreds of bodies that still have to be found. And according to the local legend, the ghosts of these bodies still linger in the forest, and you can hear bones breaking and whispers if you walk in the forest at nighttime. The Sutro Bath Ruins brings us to number 2. On the west side of San Francisco, on the south side of San Francisco, there are stone ruins that have crumbling stairs and old buildings that are said to be incredibly haunted. The Sutro Baths are said to be cursed, and this belief is still perpetrated today. Those brave enough to enter the cave have reported seeing a strange creature hiding in the cave. There are scratch marks on the walls, piles of animal carcasses, and bones left behind. You can even hear unexplained noises and footsteps echoing throughout the tunnel. And apparently this creature doesn't look like it's from Earth. If that wasn't enough, another urban legend says that this cave was the place where people would perform dark satanic rituals that involved human sacrifices. I don't know about you guys, but I'm thinking that we should close off this tunnel and never speak of it ever again. The Lady of the Stowe Lake tops this list at number 1. This lake can be found in Golden Gate Park, and this urban legend is about a mother who took her baby to the park in a stroller in the early 1900s. Well, she stopped at a park bench to rest, and she began chatting to another woman. But she didn't realize that the stroller started to roll away and it crashed into the lake. Once she realized that her baby was gone, she began to panic as she frantically searched for her baby. The mother was last seen going into the lake, so those people who were brave enough to visit the park at night might run into this devastated mother who is still searching for her baby today. It is said that she now haunts this lake and she will terrorize people into helping her search for her baby. But be careful, she might even try to pull you into the water herself to try to help search underneath the water for her baby. Well, starting off at number 10, the Shanghai Tunnels in Portland, Oregon. Portland was one of the most dangerous ports in the United States during the early 19th century, and it was the epicenter of Shanghai, a form of human trafficking. It's crazy to think human trafficking still happens today, and tunnels are still the way to do it. According to the local lore, swindlers preyed upon unsuspected men in the local salons, which were often outfitted with trap doors that deposited the victims directly into a network of underground tunnels. These men were supposedly held captive, drugged, and eventually transported to the waterfront, where they were sold to ships as unpaid laborers, aka slaves. Some worked for several years before finding their way back home. The tunnels are said to be haunted by the aggrieved spirits of the captives who died in the dark recesses behind the city. Random fact, the practice of kidnapping men to work on ships came to be known as Shanghai because the ships that were sold to were often headed to East Asia. Number 9, Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The castle-like Eastern State Penitentiary took solitary confinement to whole new levels when it was built in 1829. Prisoners lived alone, exercised alone, and ate alone. When inmates were left in a cell, a guard would cover his head with a hood so he wouldn't be seen. The prison had to abandon its solitary confinement system due to overcrowding from 1913 until it was closed in 1970. Although the forms of punishment did not get any less severe, chaining an inmate's tongue to his wrists, that's just one example, a true story. The site's one of most haunted places in America right now. Well, it welcomes thousands of visitors every year, both for its museums and annual Terror Behind the Wall celebration, which features 6 haunted attractions within the prison walls for Halloween. When you talk about an attraction inside of a prison, no thanks. Well, it was reported paranormal happenings have included dismembered laughter, shadowy figures, and pacing of footsteps. Sorry, I thought I was hearing footsteps behind me right now. Okay, I'm pretty freaked out with this one, so let's move on to the next one. So next up, number 8, we have House of the Seven Gables, Salem, Massachusetts. Now, this house did not steal its name from the classic novel. In fact, it inspired the novel itself. Salem is known for its history of the famous witch trials, and that's where Sabrina Spellman lived, but it happens to be the birthplace of Nathaniel Hawthorne, who used this 17th century house as inspiration for his famous 1851 novel, The House of the Seven Gables. Aside from its beautiful yet spooky facade, the house is surrounded by paranormal activity and ghost sightings, all based on personal experiences of staff. Every October, the house offers spooky tours as well as weekly performances of 2 plays, The Legacy of the Hanging Judge and Spirit of the Gables. Would you guys see a play in a haunted town's haunted house?
At number 7, we have Gore Orphanage. Light of Hope Orphanage was established in 1902. It was run by a religious zealot. One day the building caught fire, and the young ones inside all perished in the flames, the cries for help being unheard. The question was, how did the fire start? Well, some say it was an accident, maybe one of the orphans dropped a lamp, but then there's the legend of Old Man Gore, the cruel, sadistic man who ran the facility. In reality, the man's name was Johann Sprunger. He ran the orphanage with his wife, Katerina. It was actually a former orphanage they ran that caught on fire. It was true that they were cruel, though. Orphans attempted escaping from the institution on a number of occasions. There was also a fire in an elementary school in the nearby town of Collinwood where 176 young people died. So most likely these 2 real-life incidents were combined and kind of formed this urban legend that is Gore Orphanage. Next on the list, we have the disappearance of Brian Schaefer. In 2006, Brian Schaefer, a medical student at Ohio State University, completely vanished. On the night of March 31st, Schaefer went out with friends to the Ugly Tuna Saloona, a bar near the campus in Columbus. Surveillance footage captured him entering the bar, but never showed him actually leaving. When his friends realized he was missing, they figured he'd gone home, but he hadn't. And surveillance footage from the bar showed footage of Brian speaking with 2 women outside the bar just before 2 a.m. His friends had already left at this point. Then he went back inside and that was it. No trace of him after that. And here's the thing, the bar only had 1 entrance, monitored by surveillance cameras, which didn't record Brian leaving. On top of that, there were no signs of foul play in his apartment. Over the years, there's been lots of speculation as to what happened here, but one theory is that he voluntarily disappeared and is alive, hopefully anyway, living with a new identity. At our number 5 spot, we have Amy. On Lick Road, just outside of Cincinnati, a terrible incident is said to have taken place. A woman named Amy lost her life at the hands of someone, but the perpetrator was never found. The prevailing theory is that her boyfriend did it, though. As the years passed, tales of Amy's ghost haunting Lick Road began to spread, making the ghost of Amy one of the most prominent urban legends in Ohio. Supposedly, there are a couple ways to experience the ghost of Amy. One legend goes that if you flick your headlights onto the sign as you're turning on to Lick Road at night, you can see the name Amy briefly flash on the sign. Another goes that if you park your car at the cul-de-sac facing the woods, then flash your headlights 3 times, your windows will start to fog up with the word help being written in the condensation. Some nightly visitors have claimed to see the ghostly figure of Amy standing at the edge of the forest. Others claim to hear disembodied footsteps behind them as they make their way across the bridge. Next up, we have Satan's Hollow. In Cincinnati, there is a famous drainage tunnel, a tunnel with a very dark history. Strange and ominous things are said to have happened there. Satanic rituals and disappearances supposedly plague the tunnel, and one story goes that during one of these rituals, a portal to the underworld was accidentally opened. This has led to a number of locals believing this series of interconnected tunnels are actually a portal to hell itself now. People claim to hear strange noises coming from its depths and have even witnessed a shadowy figure known as the Shadow Man, a demonic entity who stalks the tunnel at night. The Werewolf of Defiance. So in the summer of 1972, the small town of Defiance, Ohio was rocked by a series of bizarre and terrifying encounters with what locals would describe as the Werewolf of Defiance. First reported sighting occurred when 2 railroad workers, Ted Davis and Tom Jones, were laboring on the Norfolk and Western Railway. Ted Davis, busy with his work, suddenly looked up to witness something completely unexplainable. A large wolf-like creature clutching a wooden board in its paws. The creature then just whacked Ted on the shoulder with the board before vanishing into the nearby bushes. I like the imagery of that. Just a werewolf come walking out. Bam! Alright, goodbye. Anyway, 5 days later, Ted and Tom returned to work, hoping that the strange encounter was just a one-time event. But unfortunately, they spotted this pesky werewolf again. Luckily, it was much further away this time, and they just booked it out of there. They reported the incident to the local police, and before long, this wave of similar reports flooded in from various parts of Defiance. More and more residents claimed to have encountered a wolf-man-like creature. People were scared to go outside. Like, nobody wants to be gored by a massive-sized wolf person. The sightings, did trail off, but the Wolfman of Defiance has remained a legend of Ohio ever since. And at second place, we have the Crosswick Monster. This incident took place in 1982 and has become a prominent tale in Ohio's cryptid folklore. According to this story, two young boys, Ed and Joe Lynch, encountered a terrifying creature in a field. They heard peculiar noises coming from the tall grass, and before they could react, a massive four-legged lizard-like beast emerged. The creature swiftly approached them, grabbing 13-year-old Ed in its jaws, and began dragging him towards a hollowed-out tree. Fortunately, though, the boys' screams caught the attention of three nearby men who rushed in to help. They managed to rescue Ed, but he sustained some pretty severe injuries. In response to this initial attack, a group of 60 men armed themselves with axes and clubs, and I'm imagining torches, and they formed a posse to hunt down this creature. They managed to catch up with it, and at one point it stood up on its hind legs. The chase led them to a hill of rocks where the creature vanished into a hole, never to be seen again. The story was written up in the local paper at the time, and it's since grown to be a staple of Ohio's folklore. Just what the hell was the thing that they saw that day? And finally, at our number one spot, we have the Circleville Rider. The Circleville letters case, which began in 1976 in Circleville, Ohio. Is it Circleville or Circleville? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, it's still one of the most perplexing unsolved mysteries in the state. It all began with these anonymous, threatening letters sent to numerous residents. The letters contained detailed, personal information about the recipients' lives, leading to this fear and paranoia throughout the community. The mysterious writer knew intimate details about the victims' private lives and warned them to cease certain behaviors. One of the primary recipients, Mary Gillespie, was particularly targeted. The sender claimed she had been having an affair, which Mary insisted was not true, and the situation escalated when Mary's husband, Ron Gillespie, received a letter warning him that he would be unalived. The case took a tragic turn when Ron Gillespie was found dead in his crashed car. His death was ruled an accident, but many suspected foul play. The letters persisted even after Ron's death, leaving the town baffled about the identity of the sender. Several theories emerged, including suspicions about a local school superintendent and Mary's brother-in-law, but no conclusive evidence was ever found, leaving the case unsolved. This incident has inspired numerous legends and conspiracy theories. Stories have spread about the letters having been written by some sort of vengeful ghost or spirit haunting the town, even.
Number 10, Satan's Castle, San Bernardino. Yes, this place is called Satan's Castle, and it's a no from me. Satan's Castle sits on a mountainous region that is filled with both religious and satanic lore dating back to the 19th century. There are said to be underground tunnels linking to various points of interest across the mountain, which were used during the Prohibition era. These tunnels were created mostly for transportation and smuggling booze, but also served for darker purposes. One of these tunnels is rumored to connect a Catholic church to Satan's Castle. It is said to have been the grounds for dark, ritualistic practices, which included both human and animal sacrifices, along with other dark ceremonies. Not to mention, inside one of the rooms, a pentagram used to be painted on the ground. Local Christians painted over it with the John 3:16 verse, but the pentagram always bled through. Definitely sounds satanic to me, and I will not be visiting there. Number 9, Preston Castle, Ione. The Preston School of Industry, also known as Preston Castle, was a reform school that opened in June 1894 and was considered one of the oldest and best known reform schools in the United States. The boys there grew their own food, raised livestock, and learned farming trades. Additionally, there was a print shop, bakery, and cobbler shop where the boys could learn skills for self-preservation in the real world. The superintendent controlled the life inside the school, and discipline was extreme. Starvation, isolation, and public paddling and lashings, and severe strategies were common at Preston. Now, this school has seen a lot of death. There are 17 men buried on the school grounds because they died there. Samuel Goins had his life ended after attempting to escape from the school. In 1950, Preston's head housekeeper, Anna Corbin, was beaten to death in the school's basement as well, and they never found out who did it. Employees and visitors believe that these young men are still haunting the school, which only closed in 1960, by the way. Those who have toured the grounds since have reported many strange sights and sounds, slamming doors, falling objects, disembodied voices, and ghostly physical contact. Number 8. Camp Pendleton, Area 41, San Diego. Camp Pendleton is a coastal Marine Corps base with a dark history. This place is divided up into sections, and Area 41 is haunted. Locks have been tampered with, furniture displaced, items gone missing, and strange noises are heard throughout the camp. Many think that this is done by one broken-hearted Marine in particular. This man was in love and had recently asked his girlfriend to marry him. After she had said yes, he thought his life was going great, but it didn't last long. The Marine was in his housing unit when his fiancée got a hold of him and told him that she was ending the relationship. He was so upset that he ended his life in a second-story room of the barracks. Now, some Marines are convinced his spirit remains in the area and haunts Area 41 in particular. A general feeling of unease is common here, and to this day, Marines claim that they hear the faint sound of a man softly humming the Jeopardy game show theme song around the grounds. I'm sorry. What?
Coming in hot at number 7 of this list, we have a Moundsville's Penitentiary, West Virginia. Well, you might recognize this old prison if you were to see it. MTV's Fear Show made it famous again. The decommissioned prison had thought to be haunted before it was shut down and reopened again for tours. Aside from MTV, there have been a ton of ghost hunters, documentary filmmakers. I mean, why not? This place is creepy, it's haunted. I mean, probably Sam and Dean Winchester, they're probably gonna go there as well. Ed and Lorraine Warren, they probably had to holy water a lot of beings, a lot of creatures and demons. Well, this prison holds up to 2,000 prisoners. They executed almost 100 prisoners who is said to have haunted the prison to this day, and nearly 1,000 dead in total. The building was decommissioned in 1995 and now only exists for public tours. Fun fact, actually, Charles Manson once petitioned to be transferred to this location. I'm not sure why. I mean, this guy's crazy.
You don't understand me. That's your trouble.
Number 6, we're bringing you St. Augustine Lighthouse, St. Augustine in Florida. Well, some say this is the most haunted lighthouse in America. It's also the oldest. It might be one of the most haunted ones in the world. Many people lost their lives in or around the lighthouse, and it is believed that their spirits never left the ground. One of the most famous ghost stories from this, pretty eerie place is the two petite sisters that can be heard giggling at night. Now, if I'm sleeping in bed and I'm hearing people laughing, I don't think that's too funny. I would be horrified. Their father worked at a lighthouse, and through an unforeseen accident, the two sisters and their friend had fallen off the cliff and drowned. This may not have been no accident. Another tale of the lighthouse keeper's ghost is said to have spent the last 100 years around the property after falling to his sudden death. Some even say he doesn't even know he's dead, and he's just been seen walking around smoking a cigar. Number 5, we've got the Myrtles Plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana, built on top of an Indian burial ground back in 1796. I'm not sure why people are building things on like cemeteries. You hear about like all these churches being built on cemeteries, or you're just building things on dead people. Why? Well, this sprawling plantation is said to be haunted by at least 12 different ghosts. It is now being turned into a bed and breakfast. Oh, definitely not a place I want to get up in the morning. I'm not having my coffee on top of a dead person. But let me tell you guys a little bit about Chloe. Well, Chloe is said to be the most vengeful of the ghosts that occupied this property. Well, she was hung from a tree after poisoning her slave's master's wife and 2 children with cake. Chloe sought revenge after her death, and we've even found pictures that have been taken present time with a vision of a little girl in a green dress and a head turban on the property and in the windows as people tour and take pictures of their time there. Another ghost still calls this plantation home. A man was shot by the owner of the house after the Chloe era. I mean, there's a lot of history going on in that place. Our number 4, we have the Bell Witch Cave, Adams, Tennessee. This 320-acre home was purchased by the Bell family back in 1804. John Bell was a farmer and he moved there with his wife and children. But 13 years after they had settled, they started to notice paranormal activity. The legend says that the family started to notice animals roaming the property and sounds of chains being dragged through the house. Over the years, Bell had reported to others that the presence began speaking to him and said her name was Kate, the Bell's witch. This Kate character tormented the family, but specifically John's daughter Betsy, scratching her, pulling her hair, and pinching her. It is believed that she was trying to stop Betsy's engagement, and when Betsy finally broke down, Kate said that she would leave her alone and return in 7 years. And again in 104 years. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be around, so you can do whatever you want to me. Some people think Kate never left because the entire town continued to experience her wrath. Finally, in at number 3, we have one of the most haunted places in America. We have Drummond, Arizona. It is said to be an entire haunted town. So we're not talking about like a building or a cemetery. We're talking about the whole damn place here. It is specifically known for the Drummond Hotel, which was formerly built and used as a hospital and an insane asylum, because why not? A hospital that has over 9,000 deaths. Originally built in 1927, the hospital had a short lifespan and it sat vacant for nearly 4 decades before it was turned into the Drummond Grand Hotel in 1996. The hauntings started right away and were said to be the ghosts of the tortured asylum patients. Keep an eye or an arrow for Claude Harvey, who was a maintenance man on the property in 1935. His body was found pinned underneath an elevator. Even though the elevator had not crushed him, it appeared though he was murdered and his body was just dumped there. Or maybe he was just left there, he wasn't crushed, and maybe he just died from starvation. Or maybe he saw a spider and freaked out under there. Well, there is at least 5 other ghost sightings that include women and children, and several freak accidents that have happened at this property, including a man confined to a wheelchair falling to his death from a balcony, and in the same haunted room, a man killed himself. And also, make sure you guys don't ask about room 32. Number 2 on this list, we have Step Cemetery, Benton, Louisiana. So it's kind of obvious that cemeteries are creepy and should be avoided, well, unless you need to pay your respects. But one little spot in Louisiana, well, it's said to be the former home of a cult that sacrificed animals and had orgies. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up. Our research did not determine if it was in that order. There's many stories about this, specifically in volume 5 of an old Indiana folklore book. But one that stands out is of a baby who passed away, and the mother was so distraught, she dug up a burial site for the infant, and she can still be roaming around the area today, weeping and dressed in black near her daughter's grave. You might think all cemeteries look the same, but when you get to this one, you'll definitely notice that most of the gravestones are cracked or broken, which is a bad omen in itself. Number 1 on this list, we have Moon River Brewery, Savannah, Georgia, the American Institute of Paranormal Psychology, which is obviously why we put this in the number 1 spot. New owners of the brewery noticed that something was up when they purchased it in the 90s, although it's been uninhabited for decades. Well, we all remember that our first beer and drunken shenanigans can get out of hand, but not bottles flying out of thin air and smashing against the wall kind of sort of hand, you know? So imagine just getting drunk and all of a sudden a beer just goes flying out of nowhere and you're the only one in that room. Well, the building back then served as a hospital and hundreds of people died with yellow fever. Well, these ghosts take up every edge of the brewery with special attention on the 2nd floor, or of course the basement. One woman was pushed down the stairs while the other had a frightening experience in the woman's bathroom. I wonder if the ghosts are getting drunk there. I'm not even sure if ghosts can get drunk. Imagine being a ghost, you're getting drunk and you're messing with people.